Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. She stood at the entrance, scanning the room for the man she was supposed to meet. Table 7. Table 7, she muttered under her breath, her heart racing as she nervously adjusted her purse. She took a deep breath, mustering all her courage. With a bright smile plastered on her face, she approached him. Sarah thought he was just nervous, so she quickly added, "I know, this is awkward. Blind dates are weird, right? Jenny told me you might be a little quiet, so don't worry, I can talk enough for both of us." He opened his mouth to say something, but stopped, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. His phone buzzed, a message from his associate canceling their meeting. Sarah noticed his change in demeanor, but didn't understand the reason behind it. Sarah laughed nervously, taking a sip of her water. "Tell me about it. Jenny's been trying to set me up for months, but I've been too busy with work, you know?" Sarah couldn't help but feel at ease. She was talking to a stranger, but for some reason, it felt like she had known him for longer. She even started to believe that maybe this wasn't the awkward disaster she had expected. Her stomach sank. She looked up, her face turning red with embarrassment. "You're not Kevin, are you?" she whispered, almost in disbelief. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She had sat at the wrong table, and had spent the last half hour talking to a complete stranger, thinking he was someone else. But as she hurried out of the restaurant, Richard, the man she had mistaken for Kevin, stood there, watching her go. He felt something unexpected, regret? Curiosity? He wasn't sure, but he couldn't shake the thought of never seeing her again. For the first time in a long while, he didn't want to just let this go. The door shut behind her. With a soft click, but for Richard, the story was far from over. The night air was cold as Sarah hurried out of the restaurant, her heart racing and her face flushed with embarrassment. She had never felt so foolish in her life. She thought she had been meeting Kevin, the man she had agreed to meet for a blind date, but instead, she had sat down with a complete stranger. And not just any stranger, someone who seemed far more important than she could have imagined. She kept her head down as she walked quickly, not wanting to face anyone. She could hear the distant hum of the city and feel the chill of the air biting at her skin. The last thing she wanted was to be caught in that awkward moment again, where she had mistakenly assumed the man she was talking to was someone else. As she reached the street corner, her phone buzzed in her hand, and she almost didn't want to look. It was a text from Jenny. "Hey, Emma. Where are you? I'm at table 7, looking forward to meeting you, Kevin." Sarah's stomach dropped. She had already bolted from the restaurant, and now, the reality of her mistake was hitting her even harder. She had left the man back there, probably confused, maybe even a little annoyed. She couldn't stop the wave of embarrassment that swept over her. But then, something unexpected happened. She felt a light tap on her shoulder. Sarah spun around, and standing there, looking even more put together than before, was the man she had just mistaken for Kevin. He looked at her with an expression that was a mix of curiosity and a hint of something else, maybe sympathy. Or perhaps, it was just concern. Sarah blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly, holding up her coat. You left this on the chair. I didn't want you to forget it. The gesture was so simple, yet it felt like it made everything in her chest tighten. How could he be so calm about this? She had just walked out on him without saying a word. Richard stood there for a moment, watching her, before he spoke again. Are you okay? Her throat tightened, and she didn't know how to answer. She couldn't very well tell him the truth, that she had completely embarrassed herself by sitting at the wrong table, and now she was running away. The last thing she wanted was to make him feel sorry for her. He didn't buy it. Richard could see the tension in her body, the way her eyes darted around, as if she was looking for an escape. I'm sorry about the mix-up, he said, his tone surprisingly sincere. I should have corrected you sooner. But I have to admit, you really brightened up my evening. That's rare for me. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? Brightened up his evening? She wasn't sure what to say, but she knew she couldn't stand here for much longer, talking about how she had just embarrassed herself. I should go. Thanks for the coat. As she turned to leave, Richard took a step forward. Sarah stopped in her tracks, unsure of what he meant. Explain? There was nothing to explain. She had made a mistake, and now it was over. Richard stepped a little closer, his expression more serious now. I don't know what you were expecting from tonight, but I don't want you to think that our conversation meant nothing. I'll be honest, I wasn't exactly expecting to meet someone like you tonight, either. And I'm not the best at these things. He paused for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. Sarah felt her heart race. She had expected him to brush it off and walk away, maybe laugh it off like the rich people in the movies did. But instead, here he was, asking for another chance, as if their conversation had meant something. He nodded, his expression earnest. Really? I don't know if it was the right table or the wrong one, but I do know I don't want to leave things like this. You have an energy about you that's different. She couldn't believe it. The mix-up, the awkwardness, and now this? Was he serious? He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What's that? Richard gave her a small smile, his eyes softening. I can promise that. And just like that, in the middle of the city streets, with the night air still cool around them, Sarah's life took another unexpected turn. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew that things were about to change. As Richard walked away, a small part of Sarah wondered what kind of person she had just met, and whether she could trust him with the truth. But she couldn't deny that, for the first time in a long time, she was curious. The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Sarah. After the awkward, but somehow meaningful, encounter with Richard, she found herself thinking about him more than she ever thought she would. She wasn't sure if she was imagining things or if the connection between them was real, but the invitation to meet again lingered in her mind. She was hesitant, unsure of what would happen next, but there was something about him that intrigued her. It wasn't long before Richard reached out again. A simple message, would you like to grab coffee sometime? I promise I'll be honest this time. The words felt genuine, and despite all her doubts, Sarah found herself agreeing. They met at a small cafe the following afternoon, a quiet place with soft music playing in the background and a relaxed atmosphere that helped calm her nerves. When Sarah walked in, she saw him sitting by the window, looking as polished as ever, but this time there was something different in his eyes, an openness, maybe even a hint of vulnerability. He stood up when he saw her, offering a warm smile that made her feel oddly comfortable. Sarah sat down across from him, feeling a mix of nervousness and curiosity. There was still a part of her that wondered if he was just playing a game, but there was also a part that felt drawn to him, wanting to know more. He leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Right. Well, I guess I should start by saying I'm not exactly a fan of blind dates. I usually keep to myself, stick to work and things like that. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It made sense. He had a powerful presence, someone who probably didn't have time for small talk or casual relationships. Yet, here he was, trying to make things work with someone like her. He smiled, a warm, understanding smile. I don't think you're out of place at all. Sarah shifted in her seat, the words feeling nice, but also foreign. It wasn't often that someone as confident and successful as Richard would say something like that to her. She had always felt like she didn't belong in the world of the rich and powerful. Richard's smile faded a little, but there was no hesitation in his voice. No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just trying to be honest. The truth is, I'm not looking for anything fake, but when you meet someone who, I don't know, makes you feel different, makes you actually want to try, well, I guess that's where I'm at right now. Sarah was taken aback. She had never heard someone speak so openly, especially someone who was as put together as Richard. He wasn't just a millionaire CEO, he was a man, with flaws, feelings, and doubts just like anyone else. He nodded, looking her in the eye. Exactly. It's about getting to know you. And maybe, just maybe, seeing where it goes. Sarah felt a strange flutter in her chest. There it was again, the connection that she had felt that night, in the restaurant, when they first spoke. It was real, and it was something that she couldn't ignore. They spent the next hour talking, sharing stories, laughing at the awkwardness of their first meeting, and slowly, the walls Sarah had built around herself started to come down. She began to feel at ease with him, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to hide who she was. As they finished their coffee, Richard looked at her with a serious expression, his eyes soft. Look, I know this is crazy, and I don't want to rush things. But I'd like to see you again. Not because of some arrangement or because I feel sorry for you, but because I genuinely like you, Sarah. For a moment, Sarah didn't know what to say. Was this really happening? Was he serious? After everything, could she really trust him? But looking into his eyes, she realized that he wasn't playing games. And for once, she wasn't afraid to take a chance. Richard grinned, the relief evident in his face. Good. I'll make sure this time we do it right. And with that, Sarah realized that maybe, just maybe, this mistake she had made, this awkward first meeting, was the beginning of something real. Something more than either of them could have expected. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Sarah. After that coffee meeting with Richard, things between them began to change. They met more often, shared more stories, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah found herself looking forward to every moment they spent together. Richard wasn't what she expected. He wasn't just the cold, distant CEO she had imagined. He was kind, considerate, and surprisingly thoughtful. As for her, she started to realize that maybe she was starting to like him more than she cared to admit. Their meetings became more frequent, each one filled with easy conversation and laughter. They would meet after work at small cafes, go for walks in the park, and sometimes, Richard would take her to events related to his work, showing her the world he lived in. It was clear that their connection was growing deeper, and every time she saw him, Sarah's feelings for him grew stronger. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Richard invited her to a charity gala. It was one of those upscale events where everyone was dressed to the nines, the air thick with expensive perfume and laughter. The venue was breathtaking, a grand ballroom with chandeliers sparkling overhead. As soon as they arrived, Sarah felt a little out of place. She had never been to something like this before, but Richard made her feel welcome, walking beside her with ease, introducing her to people as if they had been together for years. As they mingled, Sarah couldn't help but notice how natural everything felt. Richard wasn't just her date for the evening, he was her partner. He was warm, gracious, and treated everyone with respect. He looked at her like she was someone special, and the way he held her hand, the small touches, the glances, they all sent a message louder than words. They stood by a window, looking out at the city lights, when Richard turned to her, his expression more serious than usual. She looked up at him, sensing that whatever he was about to say was important. The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had suspected that there was something more growing between them, but hearing it from him made everything feel real. Her chest tightened with a mixture of emotions, relief, excitement, and even a little fear. She didn't know what to say at first. It felt like everything had changed in that moment. They had gone from being two people who were simply trying to figure things out to being something more. But was she ready for that? Was she ready to let someone into her life, truly let them in? Richard seemed to notice her hesitation. "Hey, if you're not ready, it's okay. I just wanted you to know how I feel." Sarah took a deep breath, looking into his eyes. She had never been good at this, being vulnerable, opening up to someone. But there was something about Richard that made her want to try. She smiled softly, her voice a little shaky but steady. Richard's expression softened, his eyes filled with warmth and something else, gratitude, maybe? He reached out, taking her hand gently. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah didn't feel like she was running from anything. She didn't feel like she was out of place or undeserving. She felt seen, truly seen, by someone who cared about her, and that was something she hadn't experienced in a long time. As the night went on, they shared a slow dance in the middle of the ballroom, the music soft around them. Everything felt right, and for once, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They didn't have all the answers, and things weren't perfect. But as Richard held her close, she realized that sometimes, it wasn't about having everything figured out. Sometimes, it was just about taking a chance, trusting someone, and seeing where it could go. And in that moment, with him by her side, she was willing to take that leap. In the midst of the grand ballroom, the city lights twinkling outside, and the soft music filling the air, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. The following weeks were filled with a newfound sense of ease and excitement for Sarah. Every time she saw Richard, she felt something deeper growing between them, something real. The relationship they had was no longer about a mistake, a misunderstanding, or an arrangement. It was something they both chose, and Sarah could feel herself slowly letting go of the walls she had built around her heart. Richard's patience and genuine care were slowly helping her to believe in the possibility of something lasting. Their time together continued to flow naturally. Richard, despite his hectic schedule, made space for Sarah in his life. They would meet for quiet dinners, stroll through the city on weekends, and often spend hours talking about their hopes and dreams. Sarah was learning more about Richard's world, his company, his responsibilities, and the pressures that came with being a CEO. But what surprised her most was the vulnerability he showed when they were alone. He had a side to him that no one else saw, a side that was thoughtful, sometimes unsure, but always present. One evening, as they sat in a cozy little cafe after dinner, Sarah found herself lost in thought, watching Richard as he talked about his latest business venture. He was passionate, but there was an undercurrent of weariness in his voice, something that made her realize that being in his position wasn't as easy as it seemed. "You're quiet tonight," Richard said, noticing her distant look. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes searching hers. "What's on your mind?" Sarah took a deep breath. She had been thinking a lot about her own future and where she fit in. It wasn't just about Richard anymore, it was about her, and what she wanted out of life. Her old dreams of owning an art studio seemed distant now, but they hadn't disappeared. She still wanted to create, still wanted to make something that was entirely hers. "I've been thinking," she began slowly, "about what I want. Not just in a relationship, but in my own life. It's like I've been so focused on surviving, on getting by, that I haven't really stopped to think about what comes next." She paused, looking down at her cup of coffee. "I want to build something. I want to do something meaningful. But I don't know how." Richard listened carefully, his gaze never leaving her. He didn't interrupt, just let her talk, which made Sarah feel heard in a way she hadn't in a long time. "You know," he said gently, once she finished, "you don't have to do everything alone. You're capable of more than you think. And if you ever need help, if you need a push to get started, I'll be right here." Sarah looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. His support meant more than he could know. It wasn't just about being there in the good times. It was about being there in the quiet, uncertain moments, when the future was unclear and the path wasn't easy to see. "Thank you," she whispered, the words coming out with more feeling than she expected. "That means more than you know." Richard smiled softly, his eyes warm. "I mean it, Sarah. Whatever you need, whenever you need it." Later that night, as Sarah lay in bed, her mind wandered back to their conversation. For the first time in a while, she allowed herself to imagine a future, one where she wasn't just surviving, but living, thriving, creating. Richard had given her a sense of possibility, a belief that maybe, just maybe, she could have it all. The career she dreamed of, the love she never thought she deserved, and a future that felt uncertain but full of potential. She closed her eyes, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just about Richard, it was about her own journey. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid to take the next step. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a new sense of determination. She didn't have all the answers, and she wasn't sure how everything would play out, but she knew one thing for certain, she wasn't going to let fear stop her. Not anymore. As she met Richard later that afternoon, she felt something different in the air between them. It wasn't just the lightness of their conversation or the easy banter that had become so familiar. It was something deeper, something that told her they were both in this for the long haul. Richard looked at her, his eyes softening as he reached for her hand. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Sarah replied, her smile genuine. "I think I am. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm heading in the right direction." Richard smiled, his heart light. "I'm glad to hear that," he said, squeezing her hand gently. I'm right here with you, Sarah. And I always will be. In that moment, Sarah knew that whatever happened next, she wasn't alone. She had found someone who not only believed in her but was willing to stand by her side through every step of the journey. And that made all the difference. The future was still unknown, but with Richard by her side, she felt ready to face it. Together, they would write the next chapter of their story. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah and Richard's relationship continued to grow. They were no longer just two people meeting for coffee or attending events together. They were partners, building something real, something that went beyond the surface of their connection. Sarah had begun to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have it all. She was rediscovering her passion for art and considering taking the leap into opening her own studio, a dream she had tucked away for years. One evening, after a quiet dinner at Richard's favorite restaurant, they took a walk along the city's waterfront, the cool breeze brushing past them. It was a beautiful night, calm, clear skies, the sound of distant traffic mixed with the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. Richard was beside her, his presence grounding, steady, and supportive. They had reached a place where words were unnecessary. It felt as though they had both come to understand one another on a deeper level. "I've been thinking a lot," Sarah said, her voice soft as she glanced at Richard. "About my art. And the future." Richard looked at her, his face lighting up with encouragement. "What have you decided?" She smiled, feeling a surge of excitement. "I think I'm ready to take the next step. To open my own studio. I've been scared for so long, but I feel like I'm finally ready to do it. It's time to stop waiting and start building what I've always wanted." Richard smiled, his eyes warm with pride. "I knew you had it in you, Sarah. I've seen it in you since the first time we met." Sarah felt a rush of gratitude and warmth at his words. They meant more than he probably knew. She had spent so many years doubting herself, unsure if she could truly pursue her dreams. But now, with Richard by her side, she felt braver. She felt like she could finally chase after the life she had always envisioned. "Thank you," she whispered. "For believing in me. For helping me believe in myself." Richard took her hand in his, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You didn't need me to believe in you, Sarah. You just needed to believe in yourself." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and excitement. Sarah began researching spaces for her studio, meeting with potential business partners, and designing her vision for what she hoped to build. Richard was there through it all, offering advice when needed, encouraging her when doubt crept in, and even helping her navigate some of the business side of things. He was her sounding board, her cheerleader, and her partner. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of uncertainty when Sarah wondered if she was doing the right thing. Was she really ready to take the leap? What if it didn't work out? But every time she voiced her concerns, Richard was there to reassure her, reminding her that failure was never something to fear. "If you fall, I'll catch you," he'd say, his words always grounding her in the moment. And so, after months of planning, Sarah opened the doors to her art studio. The space was everything she had dreamed of, a light-filled room with wooden floors, large windows overlooking the city, and walls adorned with her own paintings and artwork. It was her dream come true, and it felt surreal to see it all come together. Richard was there, of course, supporting her every step of the way. He had made sure that the opening night of her studio was a success, bringing friends, colleagues, and even some of his business contacts to show support. Sarah couldn't believe the turnout. The studio was filled with people admiring her work, asking about her creative process, and offering words of encouragement. As the night drew to a close, Sarah found herself standing next to Richard, looking out at the city from the large windows of her studio. She couldn't stop smiling. This was her moment. The one she had dreamed of for so long. "I can't believe this is real," she said, her voice full of awe. "I never thought I could actually do it." Richard stood beside her, his gaze soft. "You did it, Sarah. You made it happen." He turned to face her, his expression sincere. "I'm so proud of you. You've worked so hard to get here. And this is just the beginning." Sarah looked at him, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. "Thank you for being here. For believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Richard reached out, taking her hands in his. "You've always had everything you need, Sarah. You just had to trust yourself. And now look at you, you've created something amazing. I'm just lucky to be a part of it." For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt complete. She had built something she could be proud of, and in the process, she had discovered a new version of herself. A version that was brave, confident, and ready to face whatever came next. And with Richard by her side, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. As they stood there, hand in hand, Sarah realized that the life she had always dreamed of was no longer a distant hope, it was her reality. And she couldn't wait to see where the journey would take her next. The months that followed the opening of Sarah's studio were filled with growth, excitement, and new challenges. Her business was flourishing, and she felt more alive than she had in years. Her artwork was getting noticed, and clients began to fill her studio, appreciating her unique perspective and talent. But even with everything falling into place, there was still something in Sarah's heart that she couldn't shake, a lingering doubt that she wasn't truly ready for everything she had achieved. It was one late afternoon when Sarah found herself sitting at the small desk in her studio, staring at a blank canvas. Her thoughts were swirling, filled with the pressure of expectations, both her own and the ones others had for her. The excitement of the opening had faded into the reality of running a business, and sometimes, that weight felt overwhelming. Richard, as always, noticed when something was off. He had been so supportive, but he could tell something had changed in Sarah. She was quieter, more distant than usual, and he knew it wasn't because of him. He decided to visit her studio that evening, hoping to offer the reassurance she needed. When Sarah saw him walk through the door, his familiar smile did little to lift her spirits. He could see the tension in her posture, the way she had her arms crossed tightly over her chest as she glanced at the canvas in front of her. It wasn't the usual Sarah he had come to know, the one with a fire in her eyes and a dream in her heart. "What's going on?" Richard asked, his voice gentle, though he was clearly concerned. "You've been quiet lately. Something on your mind?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was ready to admit the vulnerability she felt. But something in his eyes, something that told her he wouldn't judge her, made her open up. "I don't know, Richard," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I just feel like I'm not ready for all of this. I thought I could do it. I thought I was prepared to take the leap, but now, I don't know if I'm good enough. I'm scared I'm going to fail." Richard's expression softened as he walked over and sat next to her, his hand gently resting on hers. "Sarah, you're doing great. You've come so far, and I've seen how hard you've worked. But I think you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. She looked at him, shaking her head. You don't understand. People are depending on me now. I can't just walk away from this. What if I disappoint them? What if I'm not what they expect me to be? Richard squeezed her hand, his eyes locking with hers. Sarah, you're not alone in this. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. I'm here, and I believe in you. But you need to believe in yourself too. For a moment, Sarah stayed silent, letting his words sink in. She had always been so focused on proving herself, on making everyone else proud. But in that moment, she realized something important. She had to trust herself, not just the opinions of others. She had built this studio, this dream, because she believed in it. And that was enough. I'm just scared, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. Richard nodded, his voice full of understanding. I know. But fear doesn't have to stop you. It's okay to be scared, Sarah. The important thing is that you keep going anyway. No one expects you to be perfect. They expect you to be real. Sarah's heart swelled with emotion as she looked at him, her doubts slowly melting away. I've been so afraid of failing that I didn't realize how much I've already accomplished. Richard smiled warmly. You've done more than most people ever will. And that's something to be proud of. But remember, you're allowed to take a breath. You're allowed to have moments of doubt. Just don't let them define you. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a sense of clarity. She didn't have to have it all figured out, and that was okay. She was building something beautiful, something that mattered. She wasn't alone, and she didn't have to carry the burden of perfection. Thank you, Sarah said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. I don't know what I would do without you. Richard leaned in, his eyes filled with warmth. You'll never have to find out. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. And neither is your dream. As they sat there together, surrounded by the paintings and the promise of the future, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't perfect, and her journey wasn't over. But she knew now that she didn't have to be afraid. She had everything she needed inside her, and with Richard by her side, she could face whatever came next. The weeks that followed were a turning point for Sarah. With Richard's unwavering support and her own growing belief in herself, she began to flourish. The doubts that once weighed heavily on her were now replaced with a renewed sense of purpose. Her studio was thriving, and she was finally starting to see the kind of success she had once only dreamed of. But as much as Sarah was growing, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else missing, a deeper connection with Richard that she hadn't fully acknowledged yet. One evening, after a busy day at the studio, Sarah and Richard sat on the rooftop of his apartment, the city skyline stretching out before them. The sky was painted with the warm colors of a setting sun, casting a golden glow over everything. They had spent the last few months together, sharing their dreams and fears, but tonight felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air, something unspoken between them. As they sat side by side, Richard turned to her, his expression serious but soft. Sarah, I've been thinking about something lately, he said, his voice filled with both tenderness and uncertainty. Sarah looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. What's on your mind? She asked, trying to mask the nervousness she felt. He hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath before continuing. I know we've been taking this slow, and I respect that. But I want to be honest with you. I care about you, Sarah. More than I ever thought I could. And I think I'm falling for you. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. She had always known there was something between them, but hearing Richard say those words out loud felt like a weight had been lifted from her chest. She had been so focused on her own journey, on proving to herself that she could succeed, that she hadn't fully realized how much Richard had become a part of her life. Her heart raced as she looked at him, trying to process everything he had just said. "Richard, she started, but words failed her. She had spent so long running from her emotions, too afraid to admit that she had fallen for him too. Richard smiled, sensing her hesitation. "You don't have to say anything right now. I just needed you to know how I feel. But I also want to make sure you know that whatever happens, I'm here for you. Whether it's just as your partner in this crazy journey we're on or something more." Sarah felt her heart swell as she listened to him. She had spent so many years doubting herself, afraid that she wasn't worthy of love or success. But Richard had been there for her from the very beginning, believing in her when she couldn't even believe in herself. Taking a deep breath, Sarah finally found her voice. "I think I'm falling for you too, Richard," she said softly, her words coming from a place of honesty and vulnerability. "I've been scared, but I'm starting to realize that I don't want to do this without you." Richard's smile widened, and he reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to be scared, Sarah. You've never had to do any of this alone." In that moment, everything felt clear. Sarah knew that there would still be challenges ahead, but with Richard by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came their way. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid to embrace it. They sat in silence for a few moments, watching the sun dip below the horizon. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, but it spoke volumes. For the first time, Sarah didn't feel like she was running from her past. She was embracing her future, with Richard by her side, and that was enough. As the evening wore on, the city lights began to twinkle, and Sarah realized that this was just the beginning. She had found something she hadn't been looking for, a love that felt real, a partnership that made her feel whole. And with that realization, she knew she was ready to face whatever came next, not as someone who was uncertain and afraid, but as someone who had finally found her place in the world. Months passed, and Sarah's life continued to evolve in ways she never imagined. The studio was thriving more than she had hoped, her art being showcased in local galleries and even gaining attention online. With every painting, she felt more confident in her abilities, more sure of her place in the world. But what had been just as transformative as her professional growth was her deepening connection with Richard. They had faced challenges together, shared countless quiet moments, and supported each other through every obstacle. Their bond had become undeniable, and with each passing day, Sarah found herself more certain that they were building something lasting. One evening, Richard invited Sarah to a cozy restaurant, a place they frequented for special moments. As they sat at a table by the window, the soft glow of the candles flickering between them, Sarah felt a sense of calm wash over her. She knew tonight was different. Something was about to change. Richard, as always, was steady and composed, his eyes never leaving hers as they talked about their day. But there was something in his gaze that told Sarah he was about to say something important. She could feel her heart race in anticipation. Finally, he reached across the table, taking her hand gently in his. "Sarah, I've been thinking about something for a while now," he said, his voice serious but warm. "You've changed my life in ways I never expected. You've made me believe in more than just business, more than just success. You've shown me what it means to really live, to share everything, to open up to someone. And I don't want to wait any longer." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized what was happening. She felt as though time had slowed, her whole world narrowing down to this moment, this conversation. Richard was looking at her with so much sincerity, so much love, that she could hardly believe it. "Sarah, I love you," Richard said, the words flowing from his heart. "I love you in a way that's different from anything I've ever known. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. Sarah's mind raced as she looked at Richard, her heart full of emotions she had never fully allowed herself to feel before. She had always been afraid of love, of letting someone in, but with Richard, everything felt right. He had been there for her in ways no one else had, not just as a partner, but as someone who truly understood her. Her heart swelled as she realized that she had already said yes in her heart long before he asked. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Richard's face lit up with the most beautiful smile she had ever seen, and in that moment, Sarah knew that her life was about to change once again. She had spent so much time doubting herself, so much time believing she didn't deserve happiness, but now, she realized she had everything she had ever wanted. The days that followed were filled with excitement and anticipation as they began to plan their future together. They talked about where they would live, the kind of life they wanted to build, and the adventures they would share. But more than anything, they talked about the kind of love they would continue to nurture, one that was full of trust, support, and mutual respect. As Sarah looked at Richard, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had come so far from the woman she used to be, the woman who had been afraid to chase her dreams, afraid to open her heart. Now, with Richard by her side, she knew that nothing was impossible. The wedding was simple yet beautiful, surrounded by their closest friends and family. As they stood together, exchanging vows, Sarah felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She wasn't just marrying Richard. She was marrying the person she had become, the woman who had learned to trust herself, to embrace love, and to live her truth. And as they walked hand in hand into their new life, Sarah realized that everything she had been through, the struggles, the doubts, the fears, had led her to this moment. It had led her to Richard, and together, they were ready to face whatever the future held. With love in their hearts and a shared vision of a life built together, Sarah knew that their story was just beginning.